Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be playing a tank that frankly nobody is playing. This is the Object 416 and it is the least popular tier 8 medium tank in the game with regards to games played on the European server in the last 30 days, which is bizarre because it has so many of the best in-class stats. We're not talking just about tier 8 medium, we're talking about in the entire game. This vehicle has the best stationary and best moving camo of any medium tank in the entirety of World of Tanks. Even better than the Borask. I'd like to clarify, it's not that much better than the Borask, but it is better. So everything that you can do in the Borask with regards to being sneaky, you can do in an Object 416. Accordingly, I'm using vents, coated optics, and an exhaust on this vehicle inside this matchup so that I can put myself in harm's way. And I genuinely thought that if I sat still there, I might not even get spotted. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter how good your camo rating is, after you fire, yeah, you're going to lose a huge amount of your camo. So while you can move around and while you can sit still, as soon as you fire, boom, you're going to lose 80-90% of that impressive camo. And while I thought that it was going to be enough in that situation, clearly it wasn't as we get hit for the SU-130. Luckily, however, it wasn't it wasn't the highest of rolls from the SU-130, so I only lose like a third of my hit points. Still not great. So I'm looking for a shot here on the SU-130 PM. Not quite able to make it. But how crazy is it that I can be playing a medium tank and kind of doing ELC even 90 things? And that's what I personally like to do in this vehicle. Play it like it's a scout. However, it's a scout that also has a lot of damage per minute. And that's because it has 2,400 damage per minute to be exact, which actually gives it one of the best damage per minutes on any vehicle at tier 8, and especially when it comes down to mediums and heavies. I think it might have the highest damage per minute of any medium and heavy at tier 8, which is outrageous. Interestingly enough, I sat still, once again thinking I wasn't going to get spotted, but there could be an ELC that's catching me, maybe a T69 in the bush, or alternatively maybe that SU-130 PM. Luckily, however, while I was getting good vision on that SU-130 PM and put a big old 100mm round into that tank that does do 320 damage, I don't get hit by any of the other vehicles. So to add on to this damage per minute that this vehicle has, that wonderful 2,400, which is why on most maps I'm going to be using a gun rammer on this vehicle and vents to be able to try and pump that awesome damage per minute up. It also has the best penetration, I believe, on any tier 8 vehicle. I can't think of a tier 8 tank that has more than 330mm of penetration. And that's because this vehicle is getting a tier 9 medium tank gun at tier 8. It's basically the T-54's gun here with 201mm of penetration. This is the same gun that the T-54 has that goes towards the Object 140. There is a different gun on the T-54 that used to be going towards the T-62A that I believe has about 220 or 225mm of standard penetration. That's not this gun. This gun is the one that leads now towards the 140, the only route that you can go on from the T-54. And to have that kind of penetration at tier 8 is outrageous. Any tier 9 tank, any tier 10 tank, they are not going to be very well when you've got 330mm of penetration. Interestingly enough, we didn't get spotted while we were spotting the VK on the enemy team, and now we do, but luckily with our low profile, it's not the easiest tank to hit, at least from the side, but from the front, yeah, I do feel like it's just squished. It's like this tank has just been flattened like a pancake, right? Some people think that this vehicle also has like a frying pan on top of the vehicle. Yeah, I can see that as well, right? So this tank, it's got so many insane statistics that I can understand why people aren't playing it, because it feels really quite awkward. But for when you get into scenarios like this where you manage to set up some vision, this thing is just absolutely deadly and it can dictate the pace of the combat. And once you start to get the field mods on this vehicle, it definitely adds to the vehicle's appeal, especially with getting the final field mod where you can reduce your reverse speed to be able to improve the camo rating by an additional 3%. It just starts to get absolutely nutty on this tank. Alright, so this game is pretty bleak, to be honest with you. However, we're able to penetrate the Skoda T56. It's the first damage that overpowered tier 8 has taken this whole game. And unfortunately, we bounce a regular round, the 200mm of penetration, not enough But you know what? We want to have an extra 60% penetration, so we're going to double dab the 2 key there to start loading heat. I would thoroughly recommend on this vehicle to have intuition so that you can make good use of the armor piercing and the heat rounds. If it is just to save credits. It's funny, this Skoda thought, wow, he shot me in that direction, so he must be behind that rock. And yeah, I can understand why he thinks I might be behind that rock, considering how crazy this thing's camo rating is. But I think that might be a little bit ambitious, even for the incredible camo rating on this tank, that I'm only 200 meters away from him and he can't manage to see me. Although, wait for it. Later on in this replay, you might find out that he wasn't actually all that crazy for thinking that that would be the case. So the T-69's flanking my SU-101. Unfortunately, the shell velocity on these rounds, not great at all. 895 on both of the rounds, but at least it's the same, so you can get used to it being mediocre. But we put 1 round into the T-69 now, wait for him to turn, avoid the Kampfpanzer, who just whizzes in front of me, finish off the Tier 8 American medium tank. And we fire a blind one there, hoping that the T-34-3 would come around the corner, but it wasn't the case. By the way, if you're thinking that this situation is pretty grave, that's because it actually really is. The ISU-152 is on their side right now, so we're going to have to deal with that. Unfortunately, whenever I use the free cam in the gameplay, it now means that for the rest of the battle, we're not going to have the rings on the minimap. But everything's going to be so close quarters from this point onwards, it doesn't really matter too much. So to all intents and purposes, considering that we have an ISU-152 on their side, who's called Sanenia, always reminds me of the YouTube video that I only had the pleasure of watching for the first time, I think a few months ago, with this this rally driver called Samir, who I just can't get it out of. You are wrecking the car, Samir! Oh, I have never laughed so much in a long time. I thoroughly recommend checking that out. It's got some probably not safe for work language, so I probably wouldn't recommend it for minors out there. But if you're an adult who doesn't mind a few choice words when it comes to... the whole story is there's this rally instructor, and then there's this dude who's Samir, I guess. But when I say he's a rally instructor, he's more of like the wingman who's providing the instruction of the corners. And to say that Samir doesn't listen to him is an understatement. But I digress. Let's focus on what's going on here. And that is, to all intents and purposes, we are in a 2 versus 6 scenario with Samir on my team not driving very well. I think he needs to go back to the tutorial to figure out the WASD. However, that might be a little bit bold, because even after playing this game for 11 years, I am still rolling, flipping, crashing, getting my tanks stuck pretty much every stream. So yeah, I can't really talk. Alright, come on, Mr. Skoda T56. And again, I don't know why I'm being so cheap here. I think I'm firing AP because I was annoyed about the barricades, the soft barricades, and also the construction, the scout tower in our base, getting in the way of my heat rounds. Remember, high explosive anti-tank rounds are now the only that can't go through objects. Boy, was I happy to see that Tiger 2 appear on low hit points. I go forwards in front of the tree, not expecting to get spotted there. And yeah, I didn't. Good stuff. Does the Skoda spot me here, though? He's aiming right at me, so I guess he does. I fire a heat round, doesn't manage to hit, and I scurry back into a dip. And when you are as flat as a pancake, it is very useful to have even tiny little undulations in the ground here that do now become hold-down positions. Talking about hold-down positions, if you were thinking this tank had armor, boy, it doesn't. It's got 110 on the front of the turret and 75 on the hull, so don't expect that. Okay, well, I'm sneaky, and I've got good view range. Unfortunately, the ELC even 90 has got even better camo and the same view range as this vehicle. The 122TM on my team says, need to flip the ISU. No, I'm sorry. Samir has got himself into that sticky situation. He's going to have to just sit there, I think, and be a little bit of a bait. There's no way I can drive in front of a Skoda T56. Wow, the T-34-3 nearly crashes themselves going after the ISU-152 there. That would have been ridiculous. But you know what? Every little bit of hit points helps. Luckily for me, the ELC, even 90, drives out, gets spotted, and now I've got a good chance. If I can manage to hit this ELC even 90, oh boy, that is huge. Unfortunately, we also take a huge amount of damage from the VK7501K. But luckily, once again, it's a low roll. That's a 490 alpha damage gun that low rolls. And the Kampfpanzer on our team actually finishes off the Scorpion as well. And so now what was our 2 versus 6 has quickly been reduced into a 2 versus 3. And just look at this camera rating. We are picking apart this Skoda, just finding our shots. Hopefully this one finishes him off. A low roll, minus 40 on our 320 Alpha, but luckily with this camo, you're right to see why the Skoda T56 was thinking that I was probably only about a couple hundred meters away from him. This is just the best camo on any medium tank in the game, with a vent exhaust build that is just propelling it to some silly levels. And then you can do some wild stuff with the bushes when you have that kind of level of camo. Okay, so now we're up to 4,600 combined. It's not the best game of World of Tanks ever, but we were on 6 kills. And hopefully, now that this T-34-3 gets caught out in the open, who couldn't see us at 280 meters, we're going to be on 7. Trying to get back into cover to avoid the VK that hit me, and whoo! He just hits the ridge line. But I feel like in that kind of a situation, you got to take the risk to secure the kill on the T-34-3 before he gets us. So in this situation, I'm going to ask the Kampfpanzer to come with me. And I nearly make the worst play of the game there, which was kind of getting caught out. The VK clearly came back around the corner. So I'm going to ping the map and tell my Kampfpanzer friend that he is still in the bush. So in this scenario, it's still really dangerous for us. We're pretty much guaranteed to die to the VK7501K. And both of us don't have enough hit points to take a shell. And so we're going to have to take matters into our own hands. And you know what? With that little bit of information we had, why don't we just try a sneaky blind shot? That is a great way to pick up a Radley Walters medal. We get a thumbs up from the 122 TM on our team and the Kampfpanzer with their 2 kills. 10 kills between the last 2 tanks standing in this round. Boy, was this a cheeky round of World of Tanks. Mailing that Radley Walters for the 8 kills, the ace tanker for our 1,353 base experience. But I did spend 50,000 credits on ammunition in this vehicle, so we lose. So don't play this thing thinking that it is going to be a cheap tank, because if you want to play it at least to its full capacity, no it isn't. So the question is, why with so many best-in-class stats are people not playing the Object 416? Well, it's very clear. This thing doesn't even have a fully traversable turret, so it makes it incredibly awkward. And combine that with some of the worst gun depression in the game with 3 degrees, meaning unless you really know your positions, you're going to find it incredibly hard to make this thing work. Add to that, horrible hit points, no armor, and this is not a very friendly tank. Leading to it to actually having one of the mid-win ratios, even though it is the least played medium tank in the game in the last, well, at tier 8 in the last 30 days. Nevertheless, if you are a cheeky player, I would thoroughly recommend actually giving this one a go. If you have access to a good crew, a good economy so you can afford some gold rounds, a premium consumable and some good equipment, this thing can actually be absolutely savage if you can master that mid to long range combat and you're incredibly sneaky. But for the majority of players, this one's painful and I would consider skipping it. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video on the day of its release, Sunday, then it's time for the World of Tanks Tech Tree Showcase later on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And this week, I'm going to be playing through towards the Type 5 Heavy. So if you want to see all of the Japanese super heavy tanks, then come along and I'll show you the whole of the line to let you know whether they're any good or if they're incredibly painful. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.